A recent report shows the U.S. has dropped dramatically in terms of economic freedom over the past decade. The Fraser Institute's ranking of 152 countries puts the United States at number 17 in terms of economic freedom. In the year 2000, we stood at number 2. So what's the reason for the big drop, and why is economic freedom important from a Christian perspective? Here to shed light on those issues is Brian Brenberg. He is economics professor at the King's College in New York City. Professor Brenberg, first let's talk about the drop in rankings. Why has the U.S. fallen so far?
Well, there are a number of reasons why the U.S. has fallen so much over the course of the past decade. One of those happens to be the size of government. Over the past decade, federal spending has increased at a rate of about 40%. So our government has gotten bigger. Government is making more economic decisions relative to private individuals than it was just a decade ago. But probably the biggest issue here is regulation. If you look at the U.S. economy, regulation on an annual basis costs businesses and entrepreneurs about $1.3 trillion a year. That's an enormous cost, compliance cost that businesses have to bear. And that number is going to go up yet again next year. Next year, we expect another $133 billion of compliance costs associated with regulation.
Are we at risk of falling even further?
Yeah, I think so. But the big issue here is I think the story isn't getting better. Regulation is increasing. The Affordable Health Care Act, as you said, is coming online. That's going to make it massively more difficult for businesses to comply with regulation. Government spending shows really no sign of abating. So I think the ranking is unlikely to improve much over the next couple of years. Many
Christians separate the financial from the spiritual, but you say economic freedom can promote Christian values. How's that so?
Absolutely. When you talk about economic freedom, what you're really talking about is the ability of individuals, families, and businesses to make economic choices. And the great thing about economic freedom, that is just the space to be creative, is that it unlocks our creative capacities. We're made in the image of a creator God, and that's one of the things that fulfills us, is to be able to create.
Well, there is a political divide between Christians. There are those who believe that government should provide services such as health care, and those who believe these needs should be addressed privately. Which do you think is more effective?
Look, the government certainly, I think, has an important role in this process. Economic freedom relies on things like strong property rights, a clear rule of law, the freedom to trade, sound money. These are the sorts of things that the government can actually do really well. And so in that sense, we do want a strong government. But we also know that the freest economies, where you have the least burdensome regulation, the least burdensome taxation, these are the economies where entrepreneurs and businesses thrive. And it's no surprise that in these economies, you tend to have more prosperity, a higher standard of living, longer lifespan, less infant mortality, all the sorts of things that we would consider to be human flourishing, human thriving.
How does economic freedom reward service to others?
Well, in a system of economic freedom, you can't take your neighbor's things. You can't have what your neighbor has unless you persuade them to part with those things. In other words, you have to serve your neighbor in order for you to benefit yourself.
We know the Bible warns us again and again about the dangers of greed and the love of money. Here in the West, we have this teaching called the prosperity gospel. Speaking as a Christian and an economist, how do we guard against those dangers the Bible speaks of?
You know, I think the great thing about economic freedom is it's not primarily that we have a chance to earn more money. It's primarily that we have a chance to unlock those creative capacities within us, right? All of us want to be creative. You can see that from the youngest child. I have 3 children under the age of 5. I see that in them every day. You can see it even those who have retired and are trying to serve others in a different way. The point of economic freedom isn't I'm going to make a lot of money. The point is I have the capacity to serve others in a way that I enjoy, in a way that meets my passions. That, I think, is where we ought to place the emphasis. Beyond that, the money is, I think, a secondary benefit, and it's a huge benefit, but the primary emphasis here is unlocking what we can do creatively as human beings.
Professor Brian Brenberg of the King's College, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.